Hello and welcome to a very special session. Miss Representation have two wonderful filmmakers, Nishta Jain and Shikha Makan. You're probably familiar with your work, even if you're not too familiar with the women, but it's my job to make you familiar with them. They're two filmmakers you're going to hear a lot more about as we see the ideas and thoughts that they have coming into the mainstream, and they will, I assure you. Already, you are seeing and you're hearing a lot of the things that have been occupying much of the time and thoughts of these two women. Anishta has done she has a remarkable body of work, which takes her from Lakshmi and Me, which in a sense was the template, I think, for Sir, the movie that a lot of people loved on Netflix. It was her relationship with her domestic help. There's on At My Doorstep, which talks about urban migrants before we really realized how invisible they were. Gulabi Gang, I think a lot of people are familiar with that. Shikha Makan has done so many ads that I think even she must have lost count of them. And a remarkable work, Bachelor Girls, which actually tells you how, even with so many privileges of education, financial independence, you can still have women who are discriminated against just because they're women. It was on Netflix for the longest time. And if you've not been able to watch it, I think, Shikha, you have to find some way to get people to watch it. I want to take this moment to quickly ask our friends behind the screen to play the trailers of both films so that you can get a glimpse of what these two women have been doing. And then we'll get into the conversation straight.
पुलिस आई है कि नहीं? ये क्या इधर की जलिया? ठाठे मागी नहीं लाग रही?
ठाठे में हल्का गिला की तो में पानी डाल बुझावा।
वाद पारा है का तो पानी बुझावा। अरे 11 बजत रहे, ज्यादा नहीं बजत रहे, ना दिमाग खराब करा हमार बेकार का। अरे तुम भी हरिया मरी है, ते अंदर काहे नहीं गए? काहे नहीं गए? ये लड़का क्यों शादी हो गया रहा का एक बार?
उनकी खत्म हुई जब उस बार अपने मायके में ही खत्म हुई थी, इसी लड़की की औरत हो।
वही मामी मामी न कहे, खबरदार।
जाने हम नहीं मठे रहा हुआ न तुम रहा।
खाना बनाते समय आग लगने से मर गई है। हम किसी प्रकार की कोई पुलिस कार्रवाई नहीं चाहते, हम पूर्ण संतुष्ट हैं, तो हम उसमें क्या करें?
मैंने सोची कि मैं सदस्य ऐसे नहीं बनाऊंगी, जब उनकी खुद की जिज्ञासा होगी तो हम सदस्य बनाएंगे। यही आए दिन हत्या। मैं संपत पाल हूँ और मैं एक महिलाओं का संगठन चलाती हूँ। देखा लड़ाई में चप्पल टूट गया।
ये हमारे बच्चे के साथ हादसा हो गया, या हमारे बच्चे ने किसी के साथ हादसा कर दिया, बाद में कह दें कि गुलाबी गैंग में जुड़ी, तुम अपने बच्चे को जेल भेजा दो। हमने आज से गुलाबी गैंग छोड़ दी।
वो ताकत मैं पैदा करूंगी। ये साड़ी मानी गिर गया तो जी मान ले पट्टा मान। हां अरे ऐसे नहीं थोड़ी लुक लड़ाई है गाड़ी ले जैसे मुई हमारे के पावन। हां आए काई बारी आते आइए।
And let's play Bachelor Girls now, Shruti. Or at least the trailer.
Yes, I'm a bachelor girl.
The first time I heard it was actually in Bombay, Bachelor Ladies.
There is this prefix to a girl when she's not married and ये तो घर से बाहर निकली भी है, तो ज़रूर कुछ होगा. The problem about belonging in Bombay is finding homes. I think it took about almost 7-8 months for me to find a house.
They said that, we cannot give you a house because you are not married.
He said that lady doesn't want to give it to a woman who stays alone.
Single हो? जाओ यहाँ से. मुस्लिम, अरे जाओ यहाँ से, एक्टर हो, चाहिए ही नहीं.
The irony is they all want to watch your films, but they don't want you to live in their building.
I might be having sex without being married. Ooh, my God, that's really bad.
He said, I've seen men come and go out of your apartment at all hours on an hourly basis.
No God will consider this a humane act, and no philosophy will ever say that you should actually punish people because they're not married.
In spite of having said that I come from a banking background and I am a South Indian, so it's like a sum total of all conservatism coming together. They were not okay with that, you know, they were not okay to give a house to me.
As you have seen the locality, it's so bad, but I found a flat, it's okay.
But it's tough, you can't share what shit you're going through. And
where is a woman like me who is recently separated from her husband, doesn't have kids, where is she supposed to go?
the only way to live for a woman is to be married.
I have a job, I vote, but that doesn't somehow come to play.
Not being able to find a home in a world city because of your gender is doubly scary.
This is सपनों की नगरी बोलते हैं ना इसको, बॉम्बे को. So what happened? It's a fucking nightmare now.
Wonderful. We could actually, I think, go on watching those films forever, but we have to get down to talking as well. Nishta, may I begin with you? And really, I want to ask, how do ideas like this, ideas where we are talking about a certain kind of women, marginalized women, all your other work has also been about people who are sort of invisible to us, how do these ideas come from the peripheries of our existence and our imagination? How do they slowly come into the mainstream? And what can we do to make that happen quicker?
That's a tough question. For me, the journey began with the film City of Photos, where it began with looking at photographs and how people like to represent themselves in photographs. And I was shooting in like small studios, and the realization that if you went closer to a picture, you saw so much. Like if you delve deeper into it, then you could actually start to uncover layers of it. And these would be studios that you would pass by every day, or you would go there for a a passport photo, and then but you wouldn't stop there to see what else is there on the walls, and you would ignore, sort of come out. And what I did with that film was to stop and look, and I think that's what changed. That's what is something like a common thing between all my films, like looking at everyday reality a little more closely. So differentiating between just seeing and looking. So when you start looking and then you stopping, actually that's very important, observing. So that's what I started doing with my films, and more or less whatever it be it shooting with farmers, which I am right now, or jute workers, which I was like a couple of years ago, another film of mine in production, or with an old lady in Austin whom I was staying with. Most of my work has been about ordinary people that we don't talk about, or in the background, and people who are marginalized. So that has been the common theme in my film. But to the tough part of your question is how do we make these things more visible? Like, I think, for example, Lakshmi and Me, where I make a film about Lakshmi, who's a domestic worker who also works at my house, as well as 5 other houses, 5 other apartments, in my neighborhood. So with somebody like her, for example, I asked something very simple, a question like, what is, I am a woman and she is a woman, and what is my relationship with her? And I'm like a feminist, and I have certain kind of ideals, but when I look closely even at myself, I realize that I'm also playing out that privilege, and that's a privilege that I question in that film. Now, this is an everyday thing, and these are about tones, these are about things that you don't do, things that you don't acknowledge, and gestures, right? Very, 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 very little things. So that's what the film is about. It's about our inactions, it is about our assumptions about people, and it's basically questions of privilege. So, I mean, this is what I am doing with my films, raising small, like, sharing everyday life and my experience of it, so that people could also start looking in that manner. And then I think it is up to people what they make of it. But I feel a film like Lakshmi or Me or At My Doorstep, I feel are such films which are so transformative for people who watch it, because these films are from a very subjective point of view, and I think everybody puts themselves in the me, that is me. So, and that's where the transformation begins, and that's why most of my film has me in them. Not, I mean, for example, in At My Doorstep, I'm not even seen, but the idea is that these are the people who work, who service an apartment,
right?
And so anybody who lives in Bombay who has that experience is in my position and starts looking at the very people that perhaps they've ignored, but they meet on everyday basis, and who provide them all kinds of services. They start seeing them and thinking about them. So I feel that these films have been transformative in a way, because
absolutely. And I think, Nishtha, for instance, we've seen this year at the Oscars, Nomadland is up for a lot of Oscars, and deservedly so. What is it? It's a woman who actually takes to a kind of life which is an everyday kind of life, but we don't necessarily know about it. She starts living as a camper, and it's a tradition that America has. Your women, in a way, are also these women who are sort of living within society, but actually also they're pioneers in a way. Your domestic health, the guard, the security guard in At My Doorstep, their lives are also pioneering lives. They've left their homes, they've come to the city with practically nothing. So, I mean, they're real heroes in a way. So when you look at those lives and you see, are these real heroes? We used to see them at some point in popular culture, then they vanished. At least in the 70s, the father used to be a mill worker, or the father was a farmer, and then the family separated. These are now absolutely invisible.
Absolutely. So the whole cinema, in fact, Bollywood and even independent cinema, they changed. It changed so much that the stories are about urban people, or even if they're rural, then the characters are somebody who are living abroad, returning, like the typical Punjabi who works abroad, returns to India, etc. So those narratives have just gone. Like the worker has gone, the rural narrative has gone. Like if you look at an entire body of films from Bollywood itself, from Mother India to Do Biga Zameen to Naya Daur, all of these films were so important, and they actually addressed the majority of the people of this country. And today, for example, 70% of the people are still agricultural based, but but their stories are not told at all, or workers. So the other film that I'm working on right now, which is currently in post-production, which is called The Golden Thread, and it's about jute workers. Jute itself, became an unwanted material. It was discarded for plastic.
Right.
But somehow, because of subsidies, the jute industry still continued. But these workers, there used to be hundreds and thousands of them, but now reduced to maybe 100,000 or something. The film looks at their lives, and so they're really at the margin of the margin. Nobody talks about them. Nobody, and I mean, actually, nobody talks about industrial workers anymore. The narrative of industrial workers from cinema has gone. I think the last film that we saw was Kala Patthar or something, and now most of these, so most of these mills that have closed down, these factories that have closed down, actually are just used as backdrops for stunt sequences, for fight sequences and films. So it's
fascinating,
Yeah, so it's
they're
actually
used for big Salman Khan, stunt sequences. You're right.
Right. So, for example, I give you an example. Like I wanted to shoot in one such the National Jute Mill, which is huge, and it closed down a few years ago. 20,000. It used to employ 20,000 people, but now that mill, they try to make money through giving it out for shooting. And so when I wanted to shoot there for my documentary, they wanted to charge me the same kind of money. I said, it's different. I want to show that these mills have closed down, and they said, no, we charge the same. Shooting is shooting. And there's such a difference between how these spaces how these spaces are being used, so this narrative has totally gone, not just out of cinema, but within, from our lives. We don't know the lives of workers. For example, right now I'm shooting the film on farmers, but I was also shooting with Nadeep Kaur, who was earlier jailed, and she's trying to organize the workers at Singhu. And if you see what the conditions of these workers are, like, it's so pathetic. And within that, for example, they get like 7,000 to 8,000 rupees for 8 hours shift, with a half an hour break. In that half an hour break, you have to eat, have your tea, pee, whatever, right? And even for that men are given 7,000 or 8,000, and women are given 1,000 less for no reason, and they're doing the same amount of work. So and then shooting with farmers. Like, I just came back from Punjab, and I think I shot for over 72 days now. And what goes into bringing that bread or that food on your table, if you saw the everyday life of an agriculture worker, the kind of risks that person takes, the kind of work that is, the nature of work itself, you would not be impervious. And that's what cinema needs to do. Like, I think we need to do like closer studies. Even if sometimes fiction films, they use these as backdrops, like, not just as stunt, like they might place the characters, in these spaces but then it doesn't tell you anything about the work or the strife or the struggle, or what they go through on a daily basis. So that's always my aim, to really make you look as minutely as possible, and at the same time, try to do it as as much in a dignified and a poetic kind of a fashion as is possible.
Yeah, Shikha, I'd like to bring you in here, because you wouldn't think that urban, educated, professional women need any more representation. You would think, they have it all. They're represented often enough. And yet you find educational and financial independence in bachelor girls is not enough to prevent discrimination. So talk about that paradox as well, and how it made you so angry.
The reason why I made Bachelor Girls was primarily because I personally went through very bad experiences, house hunting in Bombay initially. And initially I just took it like as part of, okay, you're shifting cities, it must just be one-off things that happened to me. I had an encounter with a bad chairman or a society person, and so on and so forth. And I made the film many years later, because over years I kept hearing stories one after another, of harassment, of really cases where women were asked to leave overnight, and it just shakes your whole world and all of that. And I began to feel that, here I am, I've moved from Delhi to Bombay. I fought with my parents to the point of them not talking to me for months together, not only because I was shifting cities, but because I wanted to work in films. But I was, fully charged about taking the reins of my life, and I was getting a job here, and I thought, here I am, I'm going to be financially independent, I'll stand on my feet, I will cut an identity for myself, and the last thing you expect is a door being shut on your face. And so I began to feel that housing discrimination that single women are being subject to is just another representation of patriarchy and misogyny. Because what we are actually doing, or what the society at large is actually doing, is rejecting that idea of independent, unattached woman. So whereas we have so many dialogues, not only amongst women like us, woke dialogues, but also as part of government policies like Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, and there's so much of impetus on educating a girl and making her financially independent. The reward in the end is like, oh no, you can't be on your own unless you have a badge attached to you, which is either parent or a husband. So you're forever going to be looked upon as an infant, who's never going to grow up and be on her own. So that prompted me to look for stories, and I must say that, I mean, it's, for a filmmaker, it's exciting, but at the same time depressing that it was so easy for me to find these stories, and they were just pouring in. And I shot many more interviews than actually that went into, sort of in the film. And the craziest part of this whole exercise was that although I rooted my story in Bombay, and I was also questioning the idea of tolerance and cosmopolitan aspects of Bombay, which is supposedly on the outside considered much more inclusive, and many realities beyond gender. Even, there is a very prevalent ghettoization of communities in many parts of Bombay, and veg, non-veg, and habit-related issues, which all get mixed up into, housing matters. All of these things were kind of opening in front of me. But when the promo of my film came out, it just went viral. And it was very interesting to see that this is actually the story of urban India. This is not the story of Bombay alone, because there were women who started coming out from Delhi, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Calcutta. So I actually also got curious to look into the census of, urban upwardly mobile women moving cities for work, which my film actually just focuses on this category and does not look at the working class population. And that's much more complex and layered in another way. And the census actually, the 2011 census actually revealed that the migration of urban women is on the fall.
Yeah. And women in the workforce is actually declining, the number of women in the workforce.
So many more women who we consider, by virtue of class, maybe privileged, are opting for more archaic idea of a life and family. And although they are part of these dialogues, there is not really implementation of it. Like, very few people are actually in a larger if you look across masses, really trying to bring a change. And like we were earlier talking, that it all made me feel like, women of India have really come of age and evolved much faster than the society has. So it almost makes you feel like a whole lot of women are, have gone beyond 21st century. And while the society, a large part of a society is holding on to very, very reductionist ideas of what a woman should be, despite her education and despite her financial standing.
Right. So, Nishtha, may I bring you in here? And you face this and you see this on a daily basis, not just with women, but with other communities as well. So talk a little about this idea of how society has changed, is changing. But, certain views, people still hold on to them, in this hidebound manner. Why does this happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think taking off from what Shikha said, I think the women have really advanced, and the men, because they were dominant in the patriarchal system, are still trying to hold on to that.
Right.
So everywhere you see it, like even in my films, you see, for example, in Lakshmi and Me, you see that she falls in love with this guy. She runs away from home, marries him, and he likes her for those very reasons because she's so independent and brave. But that's what he holds against her, eventually, right? And wants to pin her down. And this is an experience with a lot of women. Now, the same thing you see even in, for example, in Gulabi Gang with Sampath Pal. She too, was married off at the age of 12 to a man much older than him. And, in his, you don't see him in my film, but in the house, he just sits in a corner, and he used to be an ice cream seller, very quiet man, supportive, but nothing like, of what she is, nothing of that energy or nothing at all, no match. So this is sort of a continuous thing that is happening. At the farmers' protest, it's very interesting though, how, especially in some, so there are several unions, right? There are close to 30, 40 unions, right? So one of the biggest union, which is BKU Ugraha's union, they definitely said that a movement can only be launched if they have the women and youth and workers. So that is where you see a much more revolutionary, much more contemporary, much more modern thinking. And that's why they're able to, like, even if you look at my background.
Yeah, I was about to say they're all women.
This was one of the biggest gatherings of women on 8th March this year that India has ever seen.
Right.
There were 100,000 women, on Women's Day. So I'm just saying that this is a kind of a new attempt that people know that if they want to launch any kind of movements, they have to make women have to be equal partners. Now, if you
Shaheen Bagh, for instance, Nishtha,
absolutely.
I mean, how could you have that movement without those women, young, old? They were sitting there for months on end.
And
there was no one telling them to do what they were doing. They were doing it because they believed in what they were doing.
Exactly. And Shaheen Bagh inspired the farmers' protests.
Exactly.
Yeah. So and when you look at when you look at a woman's work, when you look at a farmer's work, when she's a woman, they said they also want to be called a farmer.
Yes,
that's the thing.
65% of India's farmers are actually women.
Right, exactly.
Those are the statistics now.
Right, and not only do they farm, work in farms, they work at home, they raise children, they do 3 jobs, and so this is the kind of people are raising these questions, etc. So yeah, but sorry, what was your
no, so I think the point is that this is exactly what we're talking about, misrepresentation, that certain ideas that we hold on to, that the Indian farmer is a man, the Indian migrant is a man, all these ideas have been just destroyed, and we've seen them destroyed so visibly, especially in this past year. The Indian dissenter or the Indian protester is a man. No, it's a young woman. The Indian farmer is an aging farmer, an aging woman. So these ideas, they're so entrenched in our minds that, maybe from Bollywood movies of Balraj Sahni as the farmer, but things have changed. We have to now capture that, right? And your lens captures it.
For example, last year, something very interesting happened because industries closed down, factories closed down. But the middle class was nice enough, to give their the domestic workers, continue to pay domestic workers. So actually, the women ran their homes last year.
Right.
So that was very interesting because they were bringing the money because of the industry, the factories were closed. So again, the same thing is happening this year. Because somehow women are being allowed to go into people's homes and work, and so they are the sole bread earners at this point of time, and I think that's going to change a lot of equations.
That's very interesting. So you found that the middle class is not as heartless as we are portrayed to be, or we just need our domestics more.
I think that both of them are true, but I think a lot has changed.
Right.
I feel like around the time when I made both Lakshmi and Me, and then at my doorstep I was shooting them at the same time, there was the domestic workers union, unionization that was happening, and that also changed people a lot, because women, the workers, they refused to do like cut their wages or lower their wages, and they would say no, we charge, this is the going rate.
Right.
So I think and they get paid quite decently now, I feel. But of course there is all kind of exploitation in our society, but I think it's much better than before.
Right. So Shikha, may I bring you in here? And again, we're talking about misrepresentation, and it's not just about gender, because we see that in bachelor girls as well. There's an increasing awareness that there is an intersectionality, as they call it fashionably these days, with caste and with community, with the sexuality. So all sorts of marginalizations are coming together and, maybe meeting at some point. Do you see this kind of thing happening?
You mean in our dialogues in society or in representations on screen?
I think both. Let's talk about both.
I think I would absolutely extend the conversation that you and Nishtha were earlier happening about representation in long form Bollywood and series now. I mean, sometimes I feel, this is my absolute personal opinion, that when we are making women oriented subjects, it is too much of hard sell that Bollywood ends up doing. It's like an enraged woman who's going to turn around, and so there's always although the intent is nice and underlining of a message is good, but somehow we, I feel, continue to distance ourselves from realities. And this whole projection of at least rural India or countryside India is all about the badlands and, the hinterlands and crime and all of that. I mean, I come from advertising, and we are having these dialogues on like every single day in terms of how should we be projecting women. And it's really heartbreaking that a lot of it comes down to sales figures and how upholding stereotypes of a household really work in favor of a brand. And so I feel that there is a positive movement forward because of so much of awareness and dialogue. So the good part is that a lot of corporates that has actually replaced the industrial India. So now, at least in the urban sphere, you see more people who you relate to as being, working in corporates and the workman of the industries. There are mandates that have been brought in. I mean, there is this whole movement, Free the Work, that is happening globally, which is forcing all the corporate brands to, give more and more work to women creators, whether they're filmmakers, whether they are creatives. But even now, the statistics show you that there are very few, for example, chief creative officers in advertising. Even now, women are given brands which are either baby or beauty, including me, a woman director. I have just remarkably made an exception and entered the automobile section and, world with bikes. And it's a struggle. It's a day-to-day struggle, always the way you're perceived, because it's all about mechanics and technology and all of that. But going back to the statistics, you still see that, there is a harder push we need for more equal representation. Even in advertising, I think the salaries, the incomes, the pay packages also continue to be discriminatory. And whatever is getting churned out eventually, on screen, as long as we are focused on selling the FMCG from the root of woman, a homemaker, and someone who's taking care of the family, but in a more of a submissive role, there isn't much there's not enough dialogue that we're trying to change, accepting commercials like Share the Load, which was an aerial TVC where, let there be an equal distribution of domestic work between a man and a woman, in writing of the scripts, or the recent Dove ad, which was talking a lot about body image. For me personally, it kind of defeated the purpose, because whereas it was saying that, how long will you go on putting beauty on a trial, the ending was khamiyan nahi khubiyan dekhiye, which almost made me feel like, so you're accepting that, physical issues are defects.
Yeah.
So look at the physical problems, let's look at, the other things, which is so wrong. I mean, we have to, I think, just question the idea of beauty and say that let's make beauty more inclusive, or let's not talk about beauty as a benchmark of judging a person. So I think there is more level of layered thinking required, and I don't know what kind of differences advertising actually make, because I've always felt advertising is branded communication. It's not, the intention is not social change, it's to make the brand have a better projection about itself.
Right.
But yes, you do see a lot more dialogues being included. So hopefully another 10 years we'll see a lot of churning around and more acceptance beyond government controls. It just bans an ad of like Tanish calling it love jihad, and every time you try to these days put anything critical, it's also under the gaze. So there's a whole interesting mesh of things in India.
Because there's not just corporate censorship in a way. What you're talking about is actually corporate censorship in a way, and it's self-censorship. But there's also the social media censorship that happens because of a particular kind of ideology that is prevalent today, where perhaps, these ideas don't necessarily fit in. But Nisha, may I also bring you in here and talk about this whole idea of, while there seems to be more diversity now on display, thanks to streaming services as well, unless there is greater opportunity for different kinds of role models and different kinds of people to be seen on screen, we will not be able to move the needle. So what has your experience been with the streaming services, with greater platforms being available, at least?
I feel that the audience is largely urban, and they like to have more urban stories, or especially as far as documentaries is concerned. Like, I was trying to have Gulabi Gang on Netflix, but failed.
What was the explanation?
Sometimes no explanation, and then later on, and I think they were just trying to dismiss it. They said, oh, because it's already been released in India theatrically, and therefore not. But everything else has been released.
Everything is. I mean, look at Wild Wild Country. They'll have 100 documentaries on Mahan and Sheila, but they can't on the Gulabi Gang.
Yeah, no, but you can't compare the Indian Netflix to the international, because they don't follow the same rules. Like there's much more documentary on, for example, the American Netflix but in India there's not, they're not open that way. So in India they've gone more like the television model, like what more people would like to see. So they've gone for popular stuff. Basically. So documentary was anyway marginalized, and it still remains marginalized as far as Netflix is concerned. So nothing has changed for us. But luckily there are several other, online platforms where our films can be shown. So in that sense, it's much better.
What are the other platforms? Do you mean like Mubi and all, or?
Yeah, Mubi, or now there is Cinema Prayer, and there are several platforms now. Movie Saints, etc. So, but the thing is that there is, in terms of monetary benefits, it's not as much as Netflix. So that's a problem. So they want it really. Some of the platforms really don't give you that kind of benefit.
I believe some of them pay you really, really badly. I had a friend who was telling me that he was paid 35,000 for his film, although he's a national award winner.
Yeah.
What kind of logic is that?
So so there's no point. So because of that, I've not, I said, doesn't matter. People don't, if they want to see it, I share the links, but that I don't want to encourage, this thing that, they can buy our films for so less. So, yeah.
So what are the ways out, Nishtha, for independent filmmakers such as you? Because while you are showing the kinds of realities that there are in India, and so many different kinds of realities, it has to get seen at the end of the day. How do we do that?
It has to get made first.
Yes.
And there's absolutely no funding at all. Like, so that in itself is such a huge task, to raise money and then to make this film. It's like risk throughout. So you have to have a special kind of temperament to really do documentaries in India, and have long-term.
But Shikha, sorry to interrupt again, but I saw you obviously have a remarkable ability because each film is funded by at least 2, 3 organizations, and I think that's how you've been able to manage.
No, Bachelor Girls was
Sorry. I was asking Nishtha. Then I'll come to you, Shikha. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, but it takes time. Some of my films have been funded very well, but it takes time. For
Right.
example, the last film, The Golden Thread, it took like 4 to 5 years for it to get funded because it's like such a marginalized topic. First is workers, then it's jute workers, you know. So everything for becomes, there is like a level of marginalization. So maybe with the farmers' protest, let's see how it goes. I can't really say. Maybe it will fare better. Hopefully, I haven't started the funding process for it.
Right. So you shoot and then you.
No, I just happened to have savings this time, and there was no way that I could raise money because the protest had already begun.
Right.
So because the funding application process takes really long.
Right. Shikha, how does it work for you?
So, Nishtha has much more experience in speaking about the funding and enabling documentary process. Bachelor Girls was completely self-funded. It was a full investment from my side in terms of money, time, and everything. But I think, as Nishtha pointed out, that people are more bent, at least people consuming streaming content, towards urban stories. Netflix picked my film, and it was not such a bad deal that they offered me, which I could cover more than what I had spent also. But yes, I'm completely aware it's really difficult to raise. It's actually, there is no state funding, for example. It really has to be personal passion for subjects that you want to tell. And I truly appreciate Nishtha for holding that.
Yeah, absolutely. And in a way, I suppose your advertising subsidizes your real, your real passion.
In my next project, I'm funding myself and going about shooting because there is such a need to talk about things which matter.
Yeah. Could you tell us a little about what you're working on next, Shikha?
It's a fiction feature project that I'm working on, which is primarily based on body image in a more light-hearted vein, but it's really here and now and very realistic. I can't talk more about that at this moment. And in a non-fiction project, I'm once again exploring the idea, the autonomy amongst women for choosing to be child-free.
Right.
So the autonomy of women over their own sexuality and
their bodies.
Intersectional, yes, in a way, because it's not only a dialogue on gender, but also environment and society and, a lot of politics around everything. So
right. And you've also made a film recently, a short film, which was very intimate. I was just watching the promo that you sent me. Linger.
Yes, so that was actually also a while back. Linger was, delving into the space of loss and grief in a short episode in a person's life, and how often our boundaries that separate past from present in such acute moments kind of get blurred. But it was also a self-funded project. I think short films have a little better gateway today in fiction, that there are some fundings available. But by and large, independent projects it's really hard to sort of put them together.
Nishtha, let's go back a little to the idea that we first began with, that, these are documentaries, these are films that are talking about things that are so visible to us, and yet we don't know how to look. So what actually started you? You talked about the city of photos, but what was really, even before that started you on this journey of actually starting to look and not just see?
I think that has always been my, I think since childhood or very early in my life, I was exposed to, experiences that were not normal, like a girl's experience, etc. So I think I began to notice things very carefully. I was always I was always that way. I was always observing things way more carefully. I would observe people, how they behave, etc. So it is something that it's it's always there, been in me. And I would question everything, why is it like this and why not like this? Why do I have to do this? Why not this? So I think there was a sort of a questioning nature in itself. And then I think maybe also the cinema that I saw, where, long take cinema or observational cinema. And I think somehow it has grown, or the books that I read, I love, so I've never made a film about big political story. I always like these minute, the details. I feel that, the God is in details, as they say. So I like those layers, and so that's been my nature. And so that's what I'm trying to hone all the time. And with every film, I think the film that followed was always something that maybe I tried in the previous one but didn't. So it kind of led to each other. Oh, this is what I want to try, this is what I couldn't do here, but maybe I could now, proceed in this particular way. I haven't tried this. Can we do this? So, Lakshmi and me and At My Doorstep are actually the same films in a way.
Right.
But in one film, I'm there.
Yeah.
And in another film, I'm not there. So, but both the films are done in a very different style, and they have men as protagonists and women as protagonists. So I was trying to even look at the same housing society from inside and then from outside. So I was doing the same thing, but in a different perspective. So I think that's what I'm constantly trying to do, like change my perspective. Stories are more or less the same, I feel like, in a way, but it's how you look at it from where you look at it. And so that's what I do. And what form does this particular story suggest? So that's always a challenge, like I don't have a form for my films. And every time, like, what I want to say and how can I say it? And that becomes a challenge. Like, this is what I want to say. So what form is this film going to take? So in a way, stories more or less are the same stories if you look at it, but it's how you tell these stories that becomes very engaging, with what people that who's telling the story, that becomes very interesting, and the connections that you make.
For instance, with Saboot, your short film, let's talk a little about that.
Yeah, so, well, after Gulabi Gang, I was quite, I had done 7 films in 10 years, and I was like, I felt I had to stop. So I started writing a fiction film, and then I also used to get tired because people would say, Nishtha, now you should make a film. And I said, so what were all this? Because in India, it's a fiction film, narrative film, which is a film, not documentary. So it's like we are the Dalits of cinema. So, but okay, I feel very empowered making it.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do a fiction, but my script didn't come out that well. But then I met an actor, somebody wanting to be an actor, Ritesh, and he says, would you make a film for me? And, so it was kind of a vanity project in a way. But then I said, yeah, why not? I would love to do a short narrative. And so this was based on a story of a friend who had from 1984. And I kind of shared the story with my team, and they liked it. And so we landed up making this film. And so it's a young doctor who's very almost an idealist in a Delhi hospital, where the situation is far from ideal in a way. So yeah, it's based on that. It's based on a real life experience. But again, in this film, what happened was that I have a male protagonist, but I have actually seeing things also from point of view of a woman. So it was interesting to keep, sort of balance out this kind of a thing. So, and then interestingly, I also look at women as perpetrators in this, which is the truth, which in other films, perhaps, a lot of people say, how can you show women as perpetrators? But I said, yeah, you know, the gender problem is a systemic problem. And this is the truth. So it's not that I have to always show women as the victim. You know, sometimes they are also victimizing. So yeah, that was my short you know, fiction, my only fiction attempt actually in the last 20 years. So
Shikha, do you hear that a lot? When will you make a film? And you have to say, what have I been doing all this while?
I think in the fictional world, what I hear more is, do you have a woman-oriented subject?
Okay.
This is that sometimes gets annoying because there is an expectation for a woman to
make a woman a
protagonist, which is I think an incredible thing to do, because forever we have not told our stories enough, and we need to tell many more stories in many ways. But to assume that a woman is best suited to represent a gender is,
right,
you know, being short-sighted and not opening the world for women to express themselves creatively vis-a-vis any kind of theme.
Right. And also when we talk about women-oriented cinema, Shikha, it gets limited sometimes to, you know, the sports biopic and the women heroes. As Nishtha says, women are not necessarily perfect. I mean, they're flawed as well. So why not have a more rounded portrayal of women?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's what I said, that most of the films that are coming out in mainstreams with women protagonists are too much of a hard sell. Like, you really want to make superheroes out of women, and you want to deny them their absolute realities and gray shades that, you know, any individual would go through. And also just having a very black and white representation of women being victims and, you know, the bearers of patriarchy is only the male gender is very, very limiting. And it somehow, it just keeps feeding back into stereotypes instead of, you know, opening up the dialogue to be more inclusive. So much so that you actually find a strange kind of a reverse sexism happening amongst urban groups now, you know, like it's become fashionable for some men to say we are feminists. And at the same time, so many people will just want to shut you up and say, don't start your feminism. This is not about feminism. Yeah, you're being too agenda oriented, you know, everywhere you wanting to perch a flag. And it's the only reason why is that we are, at least in mainstream dialogues, not really talking about, you know, the subtleties of realities. We're just projecting things in black and white fashion.
Okay, I have a few questions now. I'll just ask them and say who's asked them. The first is to Nishtha from Shaila Shora. A question for Nishtha: how do you negotiate access in a contentious setting, such as a riot scene or a protest site, with the authorities or with hostile groups? I mean, also huge respect for the work that both of you do. Nishtha?
Thank you, Shaila. I don't see you, but yeah. So this is, well, at the protest site with the farmers, of course, I mean, there was no contention with them, you know, so full cooperation. But for example, on 26 January, when the farmers got into, you know, confrontation with the police, you know, that's when it gets very tricky. And in fact, one of the team who was, which was not my team, one of the team that was present there was beaten up, etc. We were way back, we had not managed to reach there. But so, you know, so access is something with your protagonist. The access is something that takes time. And you know, it's not like we can't parachute ourselves into situations and say, hello, hi, you know, open out yourself. So I really spend a lot of time with people, and not because, oh, he's a protagonist and I want to do that, but if there is no genuine relationship or, you know, like chemistry that I feel with that person, then I don't, you know, there has to be something genuine happening. Then it reflects on the screen, then people will open up and share, you know, their deepest thoughts, concerns, insecurities, etc. But in terms of police authorities, you just have to play it, you know, you just have to play it by the ear, so to say, in the situation. how dangerous is it? You have to also protect your team. So every situation is very different. I mean, we were caught in Chhattisgarh, where some cases, a case, my cameraman left with the equipment and tapes, but left one, but then I had a case on me, etc. Then I had to get out. So, you have to, the more experience you have, the more you're able to deal with this situation. It doesn't help to be rash. For example, you have to be clever. You have to really, you have to, you have to see, but there's no point being like,
there's no point being too visible. I mean, you also have to be, do you have to sort of also in a way be invisible?
I mean, sometimes I have never done that kind of shooting as yet, like hidden camera, that kind of a stuff. When I don't mean that,
but sort of become so much part of the community that, you don't necessarily stand out.
Yeah, I mean, for example, in the film that I was going to make in Chhattisgarh, that would have been the case. But every time I try to make a film there, either the people who are working there have got busted, or some problem have happened.
What did you want to make there?
When this was way back, like, for example, in 2009 and 2000. For example, I had gone to be part of the Padyatra that Himanshu Kumar was organizing, but in 3 days everything was wrapped up and he was under arrest, etc. And I nearly escaped arrest and beating up. So yeah, so you have to really, you can't be I think the journalists have it easier than, especially with camera, it's very difficult. So you have to be subtle, you have to keep a low profile, and and don't come into the limelight, so to say. Keep on shooting and don't get attention on yourself. But important thing is to protect yourself. If you're not going to be there, your footage is not going to be there, then there's no point going to that amount of risk. You have to see how you can balance those two situations.
You have to live to fight another day.
Yes, exactly. And to live to make your film.
Yeah, I mean, what's the point otherwise? Lakshmi Krishnamurthy wants to know, what is the difference in attitude between the urban middle class women and rural working women? The Mahila Samakhya experience seemed to indicate that rural working women feel the need to take the men with them. They didn't want to humiliate them. Are middle class women more confrontational?
Is that for me? Can I take it?
Yeah.
I think that's a very good question. And I think I felt that, when I started Gulabi Gang, this in fact became a kind of a confrontation between me and Sampath Pal, because she was constantly talking about even making up, marriages in which men would beat up women, and she would try to bring them together. And for me, as an urban woman, fiercely independent, it was like, how could you do that? He beats her up and all. And he said, but the families that she brought together, they were happy to be together, So I kind of tried to see it from their point of view, and also what kind of independence do rural women have? Are they economically self-sufficient? Are they independent? And if they're not living, can they live alone like us in Bombay? Like I've been a single woman for the past, forever. So, so can they have the kind of freedom that I had, somebody living in a village? So these were the kind of things that I became, very first things that when we started doing Gulabi Gang, that I was like, oh, I had to look into it. So I'm not to look at the other viewpoint as well.
Right. Shikha, a question for you from Arya Pathak. What do you think about making another documentary on women landlords? Oh, interesting. In this full rental market, if portraying bachelor women tenants is opening up a system, the other side of women tenants is still rigid or being flexible to this demand. I think the question really is about women landlords. I think that's an interesting idea, turning the gaze on the other.
I want to point out that one of the most difficult things in while shooting for my film was to have the landlords talk on camera,
right?
Society chairmans talk on camera. I mean, they really avoided me like plague, and whatever interviews I could finally get in was with great difficulty. I think it's the whole thing about the system. So, for instance, Bombay has a setup about housing societies where, although the Constitution of India very clearly says that you cannot discriminate, in matters of housing against anybody with regards to gender, class, caste, religion. Each of the housing societies sort of follow or they create their own bylaws. And that changes the game because you may be a landlord, a woman landlord or a male landlord, owning an apartment, but do you really want to get into a daily sort of hassle and a problem with the society at large by standing up and supporting a woman tenant? Interestingly, one of the girls in my films had a wonderful woman landlord by her side, and she went so far as to approaching the court of law and filing a case against the housing society. So that was really inspiring and very brave. So again, I don't know if one can say is really like when a problem like this becomes so prevalent and it becomes a part of the system that you decide as a housing society that you're not going to allow single people, it sort of goes beyond, I think, the purview and the autonomy of single landlords to do anything in that situation.
Yeah. Nishta, there's a question from Bogna Jaroslavska. Could you describe how you choose your topic to be followed? There's so many stories to be told, but what do you prioritize? What is worth to be told? Is it a social or artistic decision? Much love from Berlin.
Hi, Bhavna. As I said earlier, I feel that, I think it has to be both. It's not just what the film is about, but what can be my creative approach to that film. And I think it's that together that I'm seeking something. It's a form and content together that I'm seeking in the next film that I'm doing. And so I think each time I'm doing a film, I'm thinking, oh, what is the next thing that I would do? And it usually comes from either the experience of the first film. And so something that I have either watched very closely or the stories of people that I have, experienced in the previous film, but have not been able to focus on. And then I say, oh, maybe this could be interesting. So the ideas are usually coming out from lived life experience and not outside of it, not saying like, oh, that would be a great idea to make a film about, but what is that connection? How is that connected to me? So where do I find myself in that film? But I feel really the films are really about filmmakers. It's also about knowing yourself and what you can bring to it, because these stories exist, but what can I bring to the story? So where does that perspective come from? That perspective can come from only a kind of a lived experience of something. So yeah, I think I see something here. I think I can, tell this story in this manner. So, that's how, so I already know like what I want to make the next film about in a way. So, and it came out of the present film.
What is it?
Because I don't know, I'm not sure that I would be. So, but it is about a Dalit woman worker. So that is a subject that but when I was
sorry, Nisha, we were just talking about that when we were talking about Ajit Dastan earlier. We were saying that after a long time, you see a Dalit woman factory worker in this, and you of course had some issues with it. But do you want to talk a bit about that?
No, I think I love that film. I love what they're trying to say, but because I worked so, I've shot like for 3 years in factories, etc. So I just felt like I had some problem with the choices,
right?
And I felt it's a story really about these two people, but their backgrounds are put later. Is this really about the factory worker? Is that woman? What do we know about the factory? What do we apart from her putting 2 drums, we come to know nothing about her day, So if she uses the toilet with the men, how does she do it? Like, I would like to know, because what kind of factories are these? I've seen open toilets in the factories that I worked, etc. So I'm just saying that that film was really not about a Dalit worker. It was about a Dalit woman who's given a job of a worker, but the narrative is something else. Those are backgrounds, I felt.
That's very interesting. So you were saying that sometimes the background is chosen before the...
No, I don't know where it came from. It may be even from a real experience or whatever. But for me, my stories come from an experience, from real experiences, real people. But while I said I really liked that story, and I just felt like maybe I wanted to know, if she's a Dalit worker, then I want to know what is her work really, apart from shifting a drum here. What does the factory make in the first place?
I couldn't quite figure out what the factory made.
So yeah, so the factory just remained a background, and I feel now these things are becoming fashionable because these places were not being talked about all this time. So suddenly all these places which are grungy, etc., are now going to be, appropriated in a way by the mainstream industry, because, and I've always seen that, and most of their stories really come from documentaries that are doing it. So the small town India came from documentaries, and then it becomes like they overdo it, then they move on to different spaces. But what do we come to know about the Dalit worker there? Really, that was my thing.
No, it's quite fascinating. Shikha, there's a question for you. From Sachdev Ramakrishna, while there seems to be an improvement on the issue of gender disparity, such as more equal pay, I'm not sure, the stereotype still exists that women are responsible for child rearing. Any views, Shikha?
It's a very broad question, actually. I can't say that women looked upon as child rearers as a stereotype. I mean, there is a biological aspect to it. There is a social aspect to it. There is a, per individual's own approach attached to the idea of child rearing. If the question is centering about projection in advertising and in broader cinema, yes, I think this kind of stereotype is still being projected. Although I would actually like to link it to what Nishtha was just saying a while back, which is very interesting, that I feel like, looking at the spaces from urban sort of gaze, not only does the mainstream try to appropriate spaces because they look production-wise very fascinating, that grungy or very edgy out there. Even issues are being appropriated. The whole culture of wokeness, it's so fashionable. That's what I'm also trying to say. For example, to show a husband rearing a man in the relationship rearing a child. It's just as she also interestingly put, just pick probably from a great piece of writing by a journalist or a documentary filmmaker who's put in a perspective. And I think it's a very interesting space that we are constantly jostling with, confronting the popular sort of projections of social issues in today, and actually understanding the real meanings and the real parameters of these worlds, that what people who actually live these lives represent. So it's very difficult to answer even a question like that. Is this a stereotype anymore? No, you will have 10 examples where you will see 5 ads, 10 movies where people are showing, we've shown justice for a Dalit, or we've shown the reality of a man who's trying to be a homemaker. But I think it's still really far from reality, and I would again repeat, works in tight boxes of black and white projection.
Yeah.
Gangadharan Menon wants to know, I think, Shikha, if you'd like to answer that, and Nishtha, shouldn't there be a film school teaching documentary filmmaking in India? Do such schools exist abroad?
Nishtha, why don't you?
Nishtha, I think, is
quite
appropriate for this.
So, I've been to 2 film schools. I did mass communication in Jamia, then I did FTI, and for example, 3 years of specialization in direction in FTI. And there is at my time, there was absolutely no understanding of what documentary was. You know, it was, I mean, they didn't differentiate. I mean, documentary is film, and we use the same principles of film on documentary, etc. But in a lot of, but today there's a lot of film students in FTI do documentary as their final project, and very good films are coming out, in fact. But abroad, you have to choose between narrative or documentary.
Okay.
So I think obviously they learn more in one stream,
Right.
but I often find I often find, like, I have not had any formal training in making documentaries. I'm actually a narrative filmmaker, but then I feel that film, I mean, I don't really differentiate. So I don't like to differentiate. So I use my knowledge of cinema in general, you know, to make documentaries. So maybe it's kind of a hybrid form. At least City of Photos was like that, was very much soon after my film school, you know. And so I've made much more pure documentaries after that. But I think it's a very interesting form that I would like to go back to. And so because today there's so much experimentation in documentary as well. So.
But at the end of the day, you're a storyteller. I mean, whether you tell your story in fiction or documentary doesn't really matter, you know.
If I can just add to that,
sure.
For instance, I never went to a film school, and I'm a completely self-trained filmmaker, worked her way up through learning. I just feel that, you know, especially if you over a period of time, by engaging into watching what other people create, you know, you have like cinema, you have books, you have art, you have life to observe from. For instance, Bachelor Girls was my first non-fiction feature-length film, but it just came out of a compelling need to tell a personal truth. And I actually, you know, a lot of people have otherwise also asked me that why did you choose a format of, you know, just headshot interviews, and it's not a conventional film where you take 3 or 4 characters and go into their lives and so forth. And it's very interesting because I came to that decision very consciously, that, you know, because I'm treading on a subject where women, you know, who are single and unattached and living in urban cities are being labeled as bachelor girls. I want my theme to be in the forefront and not go into their individual backgrounds, because at the end of the day, this is what they're reduced to, bachelor girls. So let's emerge out of that through intimate interviews. So I think it's everybody has a different process, but in a country like India, where there's actually very few film schools to start with. You know, today I'm a filmmaker. I love to say that I'm a Jamia and an FTI reject. And I would have been a very good student because I was so passionate about being a film director that I just didn't give up against all odds. But yes, I also feel that formal trainings are like great opportunities to hone your craft and discover yourself, which can otherwise take you a decade to arrive at.
Yeah, and Shikha, I also wanted to quickly point out that, you know, your story found itself into so many different kinds of movies and streaming shows later, you know, and I was just saying to you earlier that I saw Alankrita in your show, and Alankrita then sort of in a way used that idea to inform her Bombay Begums as well in the younger bankers protagonist. So it's very interesting the kind of you know, the borrowing and the sharing that's happening, right, among filmmakers.
I just want to, sorry.
Go on.
No,
please. No, I was just saying, to just extend what you're saying here, is that this is what happens. Like, even for a filmmaker like Alankrita, she may be dabbling with many themes that have affected her just by knowledge or by experience, but she's also part of Bachelor Girls, and this one experience had affected her so deeply that it found a natural progression into being articulated in a fictional work. So, and I think that's amazing, and that's a very sensitive indulgence on part of especially women filmmakers, because it's important to kind of weave these kind of narratives in whichever form we are choosing to.
Right.
Yes,
Nishta, you were saying something?
No, but I feel like, for example, there should be, because I feel that as I said earlier, the documentaries do form. For example, there was Gulab Gang, right? And there was Gulabi Gang, right? So, but there has to be some kind of acknowledgement of the fact, of that work that goes in, in these films, even in terms of ideas that they give out. But it kind of is somehow, just treated as research or something, so that people build upon, etc. So after every film of mine, filmmakers from the mainstream media have got in touch because they want you to build up on your own work and turn it into fiction, etc. But as if it was not enough, as if it was not complete. So this idea that the documentary is not complete in itself unless some sort of artificiality of actors and stars would have to come into it, that I find pretty primitive in a way. But and also with an eye to the market, etc. But not enough acknowledgement of the work that goes into making these films.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very important point, Nisha, you raised. And so many times amongst, film friends, we've discussed that there should be a patenting of content of documentaries.
Yeah.
There has to be, I mean, this is a huge debate for another session about copyrights of content. It's not that, I mean, there's so much of work that has gone into fiction now, but documentaries, like, there is an individual voice which is unique to the filmmaker, that the filmmaker has taken out, despite the fact that it's inspired from real lives. But this is a long road we have to walk in terms of acknowledgements, copyrights, patenting.
Yeah.
Well, I'm copyleft largely in my, ideology, but I feel that there has to be acknowledgement. Like, like in a book, when you're writing a book, you acknowledge that this idea came from there, and then you write footnotes, etc. So I feel that somewhere the work needs to be acknowledged, unless it's like totally copied or something like that. And then you're not even, sometimes people don't even get. I remember after City of Photos, photo studios have existed for a long time, all the time. But I remember after the film came, that suddenly a lot of mainstream cinema had these traditional, traditional studios with those backgrounds, etc. And I know those people because they would ask me reference copies. They say, can we have your film as a reference? Because, I would question them, what do you want to reference? But they want to reference your film for, Gulabi Gang was a reference for so many films in terms of how to shoot, this kind of a rural area, etc. Like what kind of, so people reference also your style, places, and how characters who are actors, etc. So I don't have a problem with that, but at least acknowledge,
just give credit where it's due. I mean, it's a small thing. That's why you have opening credits and end credits. I mean, people have given you that platform. I absolutely agree. Just the two last questions. Apparently, we're running out of time. Blandina Steinhauslin wants to know, hello, I understand that the farmers' protest is a women's protest since they are the ones attending to the fields, but why is it that in the international news, we only see the men protesting? Of course. Nishta?
No, but this is, that it is not just women. They are not the only ones attending to the fields.
Right.
Men and women both attend to actually in Punjab, for example, the men attend to the fields. Right. And largely, so it depends on the category of the farmer, right? If it's a poor farmer or a farmer worker, etc., what the gender would be. But it's both men and women at the farmers' protest. So it's not just men being shown, women are also being shown.
Right. So, and from Lakshmi, isn't narrative essential to a documentary in the sense that interrelationships and emotions make the documentary come alive? Can a documentary be completely impartial? Nishta?
Shikha?
Yeah. Okay, Shikha, you want to take that?
Yeah, I would just like to, reiterate what I said earlier, that, your personal truth, at least for a filmmaker like me, my inspiration is drawn primarily from my life experiences and the context that I'm living in. So I'm not sure if impartial is a word to use, but I would definitely say that a filmmaker's voice and perspective does trickle down when you're shaping your work. And I think that is what makes it unique in its expression.
So we have absolutely the last question. I've been told to wrap up. It's such a pity. I think I could go on talking to both of you, but we have the absolutely last question from Shruti Rao. I also had a question. In the age of Netflix, Insta stories, TikToks, binge watching, and short attention spans, what is the scope and space for independent, self-funded, feature-length documentaries, especially documentaries spotlighting the lives of the ordinary and the marginalized? Is there audience for it? Is it more for the festival circuit? Nishtha, Shikha, both of you.
Nishtha, please take that question.
It's tough. I mean, there is an increasing audience for documentary, but it's tough because especially the OTT platforms, they also dictate the kind of formats they want. There is a certain kind of an American format to documentaries that people want, which is a lot of speaking, and then there is a European. The Europeans have a slightly different style, etc. So, and Indians also have their own, it's our style. So with OTT platforms, there's a lot of dictating in terms of the format of the film, and I feel that is actually an hindrance. So I want to make a film, I don't want to make a film because it should be made like that. I want to experiment in that form, and when you want to do that, it's a risk that you take, because some people will love it. Everybody might love it, and some people may not. They might want more traditional format where everything is explained, but I might want it to be more observational and not so much spoken dialogues, etc. So it depends. For example, Honeyland was a completely observational film. It got Oscar nominated, I think, in 2 categories, etc. So it was successful. So things are changing, for documentary quite a lot. People are getting used to different formats, but earlier they expected a kind of a format, So a lot of the Indian documentaries, which were experimental or they were doing their own thing, did not fit into those formats. So they did not find so much distribution. But I think the market is much more, the audience is much more accepting and much more educated now with documentaries. So I think it is opening out.
Yeah, great. Shikha, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I actually absolutely agree with her, and I just hope that all the platforms learn to, or at least brave to look beyond the figures and the numbers of subscriptions increasing, because it's also like they're also, like Nisha earlier said, they've gone into a more TV sort of model. They're looking at what is popular. I think preempting the audiences, looking at statistics and data from past is really not trying to, open for newer content to come in, because the audience is there. Somebody just needs to give it that little push and allow that platform,
But I have something to say, and that is very important, is that what these platforms, especially Netflix, is not doing is like they are kind of censoring the content. Let's say that. So in a way, they are not taking risks with the content, like the way they would do in the US, like the way they would do from other countries. But with India, they are not doing it. So we have a huge
platforms right now. It's happening with even other OTT, because I'm in the pitch for 2-3 projects, and this is the kind of feedback one is getting. Like we've been told
there's a lot of self-censorship happening.
Yeah, what subjects will fly and which subjects are sort of risky. So
what is risky, Shikha, according to them?
Well, this is a really big discussion. I think we are just towing the line and trying to remain in a more comfortable space, which is devoid of critical thinking, whether it is critical thinking in terms of social issues or the establishment, in whichever way. For example, the farmers' protest is really against, the new laws introduced by the current establishment. And this is something that will not make the bearers of OTTs very comfortable, for example, to give a mass audience, whereas it's very important. It is very important to watch these films for healthy dialogues. The critical thinking will only make a society progress. But I mean, we're all aware of what happened with Tandav, the show which came on Amazon, and it was all out in the news. So I think there is these are times where a lot of things are changing, and it's interesting to see how we shape up as a society.
So even your dissent has to be socially acceptable.
Absolutely.
Or government sanctioned.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I hope things improve, and I hope we get to watch more documentaries from both of you. And we certainly, I would recommend to MAP that they do a festival of your work. It's something that really needs to be seen widely. And it's only when we see such alternatives widely, and they're all in front of us. But as Nishtha says, it's only when we start looking that we'll actually see, how many realities India lives in. Thank you very much, Nishtha Jain. Thank you very much, Shikha. And thank you very much to the sign language, Martha, who was actually doing the sign language. I hope I didn't speak too fast for her. Thank you, Shruti, and thank you very much, MAP, for hosting this. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you to all the questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you to the Bangalore International Center and MAP. Thank you.